working off of both my 45-year-old experiences, 45 years ago experiences, and then looking and playing right now, pity the poor magic user. We have, working off only at this point of the player's handbook, we have, first of all, an understanding from intelligence. Intelligence will set minimum and maximum of number of spells you can know per level. And then you have a chance to know each listed spell. Going from this, when you are a magic user, upon attaining the ability to use spells of a given level, remember, level of spell, your level is a different number. All right, now you're eligible to use, say, third level spells. So you immediately go to the third level spell list, and you will roll for each spell your chance to know or understand, better yet, your chance to understand each of those spells. So of the given level of spell, there's a bunch that you probably just cannot get, and can wave it in front of your nose 100 times and your character just won't comprehend it. And there's a minimum number of spells that you can know per level. So therefore, if you come up short of that minimum, then you go back to the beginning of the list and try again. And ultimately, when you hit your minimum, if you end up knowing more than when you hit your maximum, see what I mean? You'll end up somewhere in there. And you do that upon that moment. Now, what about, day to day? How does that dovetail with the idea that you have this book and spells are written in it? Apparently, that intelligence stuff is intrinsic and is not related to the spells you have in your book. And then, of course, the subset, the number you can hold in your head, given your level. And intelligence gives you no bonus on that, by the way. So there you are. We know sort of more abstractly which of these spells you can even understand of the levels that you're eligible to cast. And then we have your book, and it has spells in it, and the idea is that you are acquiring more spells. Given the instructions in the player's handbook, it's, aside from references to something that your dungeon master knows, the only thing you can think of is that, well, I have, I guess, all the spells of the level in there, or I only have the ones that I know that I know. There's some talk of, how many do I get to have in my book? And in the player's handbook, it's not really all that evident. A lot of attention is devoted there to casting the spells and how you forget them and stuff like that, but not what's actually in the book. So, going by the default, people would say, well, I must have the one in the book that I know that I can memorize. And typically people would say, well, I know sleep as a first level magic user, and we figure that's in the book. Getting more spells into the book is something that I guess kind of happens, or upon getting your level and confounding that with the idea of the chance to know them, will basically say, well, all the ones that you can know, they're in your book now. That would be very generous. Well, finally, the Dungeon Master's Guide comes out, and things are a little more detailed, but they also don't really quite mesh with what either the player's handbook, depending on how you read it, or how play culture for a given person had developed. It's basically coming out of, the blue. This is how we do it. It's like, all right, I guess this is how we do it. And then things get a little bit sticky. Apparently, you get to, as a first level magic user, you have been taught, or have in your book and have been taught, in an offensive spell, a defensive spell, and a miscellaneous spell. And the Dungeon Master rolls for which one it is. So, and you also get read magic. Automatically you get read magic, and then the Dungeon Master rolls on each of these. There's 30 spells in the first level list, and they divide neatly into these 3 categories. So it's a D10. A 10 result, I should say 27, because a 10 result is that the player gets to choose for that particular list. Otherwise, it is what it is. So you might be landed with, for example, um, you know, push and jump and message, as well as read magic. And you're like, where's my sleep? I mean, what good is a first level magic user without sleep? I mean, that's bizarre. Well, so that's sort of was the first jarring thing that I encountered, was that I might not have sleep as a first level magic user. It's very clear before those little tables. It's even says player character magic user will then have a total of four, count them, four spells with which to seek his or her fortune. So it's real clear. Then after the tables, it also says um, you can furthermore allow an extra defensive or miscellaneous spell so that the character begins with five spells. I mean, that's after we were just told to count them four. So you're kind of getting a double message there. And this allow is sort of a DM thing. So, anyway, you may have four or five first level spells in your book. And are we to assume that these are ones that you do we even have to roll to see whether you can comprehend them? Maybe we did that first, so that we went through the first level list, discovered the ones you can comprehend, and then went to this thing and rolled to see. And what if we get one that we know we can't comprehend? I guess we roll again. Okay, so the systemic approach to this, you can easily solve it with some sort of decision, but textually it's not meshing that well. Then we move on to the business about getting spells. Exactly where it lays down that you will encounter scrolls in the dungeon, and that you can then take what that scroll, and if it is of a level that you can cast, and it's not in your book. Apparently now we know it's in your book, and so you find a scroll of, say, sleep, and you're like, boo, I can write this down in my book, and it tells you that you can, although it will destroy it as a spell. So the scroll is no longer usable as an instacast as it would ordinarily be. So apparently that's how you get your scrolls. Excuse me. That's how you get your spells into your book. There's a section here. It says spells beyond those at start, which moves into the idea that these should be really, really hard. There's a huge section. The bulk of this is about interacting with NPCs, and it's very much in that, the many faces of Gary Gygax. This is the one that hates the players and says that they abuse everything and they get too much. And so it's all about the infrastructure of play and the way you play NPCs and the way they interact with things. They need to be sucking wind, and they need to not be getting spells, and NPCs are going to keep them from them and have abusive practices and prices, and tells you all about how that's great because then they have to go on adventures. Okay, so after a great deal of speechifying about this, then you're finally saying, all right, so I find uh, a spell in this dungeon, in this scroll. Now, hold on. I believe we have already rolled to learn the ones that I cannot know of my level. And here we have this scroll which says, this spell. And so if it's not one that I can use, then, or understand, then I guess I have to sell it or something. Um, what we're doing is kind of statistically whittling down not only the kind of magic that you can even use, but upon whether you can get access to any magic. And so you kind of are seeing doors slammed in your character's face of, you really aren't ever going to have, you're always going to have this deficit of spells in your book relative to the ones you can know. The ones you can know are limited from the ones of that level. And then you have all of these things. You have to go through, like, 500 kobolds or something, or one whole blue dragon or something, in order to have the chance to even have, this spell. And maybe it's not even a spell you can have. Anyway, as I say, looking at this, it swiftly becomes the case, even if you don't add the things like the material components, which are extremely extensive, and a wide number of other things, you kind of get the idea that the magic user is being blocked, really getting blocked from play.